Hi, it's Todd. In this video, I'm going to talk about RPG review videos. Something came up earlier this week. I think I saw an article posted somewhere, blog post, talking about this right here, Maze of the Blue Medusa. It's a beautiful book. It's filled with really interesting artwork, a lot of interesting locations, a cool setting. It's a beautiful piece. And I think when it came out originally, maybe a year or two ago, I guess, right? These are things that the ideas are interesting, the layout is interesting. It kind of makes a really beautiful package. And I think a lot of people really were attracted to it and read it, and it was really very interesting. But I think ultimately these products, anything, and here's Hot Spring Island, which is another one, they're not just pieces to be looked at or appreciated for those things I just mentioned. Ultimately, they're playing aids or their settings or their campaigns, and they need to be judged as such. Or if they're not going to be judged as such, whoever is doing the judging should be open about how they've used the material or not used the material. I've read through Maze of the Blue Medusa, and it's has a lot of great stuff that I have absorbed and might put into future work that I do in my games, but I haven't run it. And my goal with these videos is that for me to be honest about if I'm looking at something and I'm using it as inspirational material, that I say as much, or that if I've run it, that I say as much, because it's important. And it's important because how you read something can often be very different from how you play something or how useful it is in a playing environment. I often, would get frustrated with people who would say things about, classic D&D, like basic expert videos, first couple of videos I posted, because they would talk about things that might seem true or obvious through reading the material, but don't add up to the experience of playing the material. And that can swing both ways. Some material will shine when you read it and absolutely fall flat when you try to use it for a variety of reasons. And some material will seem very flat, uninteresting, or, disorganized when you read it, only for it to sort of blossom when you actually use it as a table. Things that don't seem apparent when you're just reading it will become apparent at the table, and sometimes things that are obvious when you read it are not so obvious when you're trying to use it as an actual resource, right? Because you may be absorbing things fine if you're reading this whole book, front to back. Things may make perfect sense. Then you're sitting at the table and then you have to look something up and suddenly it's a bear. Or suddenly things that you thought you understood when it actually came to putting it into motion in the game, that's where it falls down. So there were some articles, kind of a backlash, I guess, against Maze of the Blue Medusa for basically these reasons. That people who actually had played it, or at least a few individuals who played it, did not find it as amazing an experience as maybe some reviews or some, bloggers, some people on the internet had, talked about when they'd written up reviews. And sometimes, it's an interesting thing. When you're writing a blog or you're making videos, you want to be topical. You want to be in the moment. You want to be what's coming out now that I can talk about, because that's going to get people to click on me. That's going to get people to read me. That's going to get views. Because I want people to watch my videos. People want other people to read their blogs. You're not just doing them in a vacuum. So you want to sort of get on top of things kind of as they come. At the same time, if someone's writing a review of Maze of the Blue Medusa a week after it, they got it at a Kickstarter, they couldn't possibly have run it yet. Certainly not the whole thing. So when they talk about how amazing it is, what are they really talking about? If they're not telling you that they didn't run it, then what are they saying, right? When they talk about how amazing it is, how can they really know? It can read great. And I'm not even trying to say the Maze of the Blue Medusa or Hot Spring Island are not great, but I've only used them just for idea, as things to make my mind, give me inspiration, things to give me sort of, juice for my mind to create my own stuff. I haven't tried to run it, so I can't say for sure how it's going to run. I know for Hot Spring Island that people I've talked to have had sort of mixed results running it. Does that mean it's bad? I don't know. I can't say for myself. I've run it. Maybe it doesn't work quite as well running it as it appears as a package, because it is a beautiful package. And I think we can get caught up in that as people who if you read a lot of RPG stuff, if you're on a lot of, you're on in the communities a lot, it's easy to want to get excited about stuff that breaks the mold or is interesting or, is weird or strange or kind of, goes to the beat of its own drum. It has beautiful art and they really seem to go the extra mile, and all that stuff is great. And it should be celebrated when people try to sort of push the envelope in different ways. But at the same time, ultimately, these things need their use to us is at the table. And if that's not the use to us, right, then we should be clear about that when we're talking about it. We should say, up front and center, hey, this is just a reading review. This is just how it seems to me, just having read it. Because stuff on the internet sticks around, and you may have written a review, or someone may have written a review in the first kind of honeymoon period after everyone's gotten their Kickstarter, packages in the mail, and then it sits there. And then maybe a year or two down the line, somebody else comes and picks it up, and they don't know that maybe the bloom came off the rose in the next month when you actually sat down to do it, because you never did a follow-up, blog post saying, here's how it was when I actually ran it, or here are the problems that I ran into when I tried to run it, or here are the things that I thought made great sense as a reading reference, but when I went to use it as the table, it just didn't work, right? There may be a whole host of those things where you don't know them at first. You can't know them at first. But I think it's important that if you're writing or you're talking about these kind of products, that we make clear under what circumstances we're looking at them. Otherwise, though we may not intend to be dishonest about them, it's sort of a dishonesty by omission. Because down the line, if somebody comes back and sees a video or reads a blog post later on, they're not going to know the circumstances under which you did the first, your blog post, your original post, if you don't tell them. But if you tell them, hey, I'm writing this as someone who's looking at this for inspiration, but I haven't actually played it as a setting, then that tells me something. And as someone who buys a lot of material, but generally runs their own homebrew, I have no problem with that angle, because that's the angle that I come from. I often will buy stuff not because I intend to run it as is, but because there's some gold in there, just as far as maybe some things that they try to do mechanically, or that there are tables in there that I can pull out and use for myself, or that there's classes that are interesting, or monsters that are interesting, or just even illustrations that are evocative that I feel like, well, I can read, time and again, and that will give me something that I can use. I think that's a perfectly valid reason to buy a book. I think it's a perfectly valid reason to like a book. There are probably a lot of stuff that I like in that vein, that I look at and say, well, I'm probably not going to run this ever, at least not as is, but there's a lot I can take from it. I think probably something like Bornheim might be a something like that, where the settings may be a little too weird, and and I don't like some of the things that happen in there. Maybe some of the violence is not quite in the directions that I like to go, some of the sexualized violence, but I can certainly find a lot to appreciate in it. But I think it's my responsibility, and it's the responsibility of anyone who's writing reviews or doing videos to mention that, to say, here's where I come from. Because if you don't tell the reader or the listener or the viewer, they're not going to know. And it's something that, we would not accept, I think, in other mediums. I mean, would you accept a movie reviewer if they were reviewing the movie on the basis of the script? Probably not. You might find it interesting. You might find there's some insight there, but we understand that the script is not the movie. Probably needs a good script to make a good movie, but you could take a good script and make a bad movie. Good script would be an okay movie, right? A lot happens between the translation from, page to screen. And by the same token, there's a lot that happens when you have to translate, this material in one of these books to the, oral retelling and interactivity and everything that happens, at your gaming table. There's a lot that happens. And I think if you haven't tried to do that, then there's some part of the rules that you can't totally understand. I just think that there's no way, if you don't actually try it, that you could fully appreciate the strengths or the weaknesses or the limitations of some of these books. And that's ultimately their purpose. If it was just a player aid, if it was a bunch of tables, then you would expect somebody who's reviewing it to put it through its paces and generate stuff with the tables to see how it works. If it's a setting, if it's a mega dungeon, I think, you have to run it. That is its purpose. Otherwise, what are you really reviewing? And if you're not reviewing it as a mega dungeon, if you're reviewing it just as sort of a resource for inspiration, then, say so. And that will avoid any confusion now or in the future of people coming back and looking at your reviews. So I just wanted to talk about that because it come up this week. It seemed kind of timely, at least in my brain. And it's something that, let me know if I don't say or if I'm vague about how I use something, because that will definitely color what I say about it. And hopefully I'll stay on top of making sure to be informative about when I'm looking at material, how I have used it myself and how those experiences have gone. And that way, you as a viewer will know not only where I stand on something, but also, in what capacity. And that way, if you intend to use it differently from me, more or less, then, you'll be more equipped to put my views in perspective. And I just like to wrap by saying, if you like this video, please hit the like button. If you feel like subscribing to, hearing me talk about more RPG related stuff, please hit the subscribe button. Other than that, I will talk to you later.